Hello and welcome to Pandora's Box. This is Kaleah, and today I'm going to talk about post-traumatic stress and anxiety, narcissistic abuse, and finding safety. Post-traumatic stress and anxiety is probably the number one symptom that people who come to me for counseling and hypnotherapy are seeking relief from, especially if they have come out of narcissistically abusive relationships. In the aftermath of narcissistic abuse, we usually have two major things going on: post-traumatic stress and emotional overload, which contributes to the post-traumatic stress. Both need to be approached a little bit differently. Emotions need to be welcomed and felt. I talk about this a lot in my broadcast. We need to develop emotional awareness and learn to embrace what we are feeling rather than suppress or run from difficult emotions. Sometimes just the act of trying to keep these difficult emotions shoved down can cause the panic and anxiety associated with PTSD. Feeling is healing. So you need to create a safe place to feel what wants to emerge. The safe place I talk about has a twofold purpose. One is to create a sanctuary for your emotional self to be free and express whatever is coming to the surface. And the second purpose is to create safety for the fragile nervous system that seems to be stuck in a persistent pattern of fight or flight. Let's put it this way. The body doesn't feel safe. And when I say the body, I'm talking about your cellular body, your subconscious. It feels threatened and is trying to cope with the threat. It may feel under attack or feel the environment around it is hostile. How did it get this way, you might ask? Well, much of the internal threat may have started in early childhood when your safety felt threatened. You may have experienced neglect, abandonment, or abuse of some kind, narcissistic or psychological abuse, physical abuse, or sexual abuse. And even if you are someone who actually had what you would call good, loving parents, there may still have been times when you felt abandoned, rejected, or neglected. It may be of no fault of your parents. There are so many different circumstances where a child feels deep pain and fear but has no way to communicate because it's still young and nonverbal. For example, some parents are forced to leave their infant children at daycare centers so that they can work. Or if a mother is ill, she may not be available to that child during an illness. Whatever the reason, you need to consider that the blueprint was set for your unsafe relationship with the world early on. You may have forgotten all about it and gone on to live what seemed to be a normal life. But then you get involved in a relationship with a narcissist, and the environment was so toxic, confusing, and psychologically twisted that you blew a circuit, so to speak. Blowing the circuit is the activation point of the post-traumatic stress. Suddenly you feel anxious, panicked, fearful, and are experiencing intrusive and obsessive thoughts. The tendency is to spin the stories over and over in your head, looking for the missing piece, the missing link that will help you to make sense of everything. And finally, it will click into place and you will feel normal again. But it doesn't work this way. This approach only causes more obsession. Understanding your abuser and the abuse can be helpful on many levels, but what the body really needs is to calm down and feel safe. You need to separate the relationship with the narcissist and the feelings you are experiencing in your body. Of course, the narcissist was the major trigger and even a cause of the circuit being blown. But once that circuit is blown, you need to deal with the body more than the rambling mind. I like to compare this to being in a hit-and-run accident where you are walking down the road, enjoying your day, and a sports car comes out of nowhere and hits you, throwing you off the road into the ditch. The driver doesn't give a second thought and speeds off into the sunset. Meanwhile, you've been taken to the hospital and you're in critical condition with a full body cast, a head bandage from the concussion, and hooked up to IVs and feeding tubes. If you are to heal and walk again, you can't be focusing on the person who ran into you, who ran you off the road. Sure, you're going to have some pretty major feelings around this, and it's important to express your feelings, but your attention really needs to be turned to getting better, to your own healing. This is the time to create a sanctuary for the soul where you can nurture yourself and heal. One of the purposes of going no contact with an abuser is because the abuser is obviously associated with danger. Your cellular memories have recorded the many episodes of crazy-making, abusive, shaming, guilting, blame shifting, devaluing, and ultimately discarding. Your body associates the abuser with danger. As long as that threat of danger is near, it needs to remain on high alert. Most people easily make the connection between their relationship with the narcissist and their post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. The narcissist was successful at breaking through their boundaries and invading their inner space, so the inner space is compromised. One needs to clear the narcissistic invader out of the inner space, remove his or her energy from your energy field, and completely reclaim the space. I'm not talking about just your home, but your inner home, your inner sanctuary. The first thing that one needs to do is to get the physical narcissist out of his or her space, so there's no more physical contact. This means in-person contact, phone, text, email, messenger, or sending a message through others. It also means visiting profiles on social media. You need to get rid of all of this. Get that person out of your physical space. And once the narcissist is cleared out of your physical space, you begin the more difficult task of clearing him or her out of your psychic space, your emotional space, your energy field. You may attempt to stop thinking about that person, stop obsessing about him or her, and stop focusing on the new source of supply that that person may have. But if I were to say to you that I want you to stop thinking of him, no matter what, don't think about him. Don't let your mind go there. You wouldn't be able to do this because you can't force yourself not to think of something. When you think of something you don't want to think about, it brings about uncomfortable emotions. And the tendency is to try and process your emotions with your mind. And this doesn't work. Emotions are not a mental process. They are feelings, and they need to be felt before they can be released. So what do you do with these obsessive thoughts? Well, the obsessive thoughts is your mind trying to resolve a deep inner conflict. This comes from the cognitive dissonance. Remember, your mind is trying to get things to click into place. It's not going to click into place and suddenly everything will make sense. No, this is a pretty senseless reality. It's not going to happen. You will need to work on a level that is counterintuitive to what you would normally do. Drop into your feeling center, and I'm talking about when you are obsessing, when you are spinning stories in your mind, you're going to drop into your feelings, into that part of your body that is feeling the feelings, which is normally around the solar plexus. Check in with your physical body. Talk to the cells of your body. Inform your body that you are safe, that there is no immediate danger. Everything is okay. You are in a safe place. Remember, your body is still on hyper alert for the danger that might be just around the corner. And that danger is the narcissist or whatever the threat is for you. You need to recognize that the psychological abuse coming from a narcissistic person or system has affected you deeply, and you need to make a commitment to yourself that you will protect your mind, body, and emotions from further assault. You need to be the protector of yourself. Don't let that danger back in the door. You need to convince the cells of your body and your nervous system that the danger is in the past. It isn't happening any longer. You won't let it happen. You need to protect yourself, your body, mind, emotions, and spirit. You may want to just put your hands on your belly and repeat out loud over and over again, "You are safe. You are safe. You are safe." If you can't trust yourself not to go back to the lion's den, should the opportunity present itself, your body will be on high alert because it knows that you may very well put it in the path of danger once again. There's a lack of trust between your body and your emotions, a conflict going on there. Your emotions may still be in fantasy world, that things could be different, that there is true love there, that this person didn't really mean all those horrible behaviors and actions or things that they said or did in that relationship. This is another reason no contact is so important. You're making a commitment to yourself that you're not going to put yourself in harm's way again. You're not going to go back into the lion's den, no matter what. You recognize there is danger there, and you need to avoid that danger with all of your might. That commitment needs to be strong. And once you make that commitment, not only to go no contact with a narcissistic personality, but to not allow this kind of crazy-making, confusing, psychologically abusive energy into your life any longer. As soon as you recognize this kind of energy, you release it. Your job is to keep you safe. The reason some people do have relief talking about what happened to them is that they feel validated for all the crazy experiences they've had. And when they feel somebody really gets it, it gives them a sort of permission to release the self-blame and go to a place of self-love instead. The self-blame is wrapped up with shame, guilt, and feelings of unworthiness. The shame, guilt, and feelings of unworthiness are core wounds that, when triggered, set off the anxiety response. There is a deep fear of not being enough or being so flawed that nobody would really want you or love you. This fear of being a bad person is overwhelming because it is core. You experience this core pain when you were very young and you didn't have the tools or support to deal with it, so you cut off from it. And now here it is again, and it's very intense. The narcissist or abuser in your life invokes that core pain and fear. Narcissists are all about projection and blame. They love to put it all on you and tell you that you are the problem. There's something seriously wrong with you. Nobody would ever want to be with you. You're worthless, disposable, and replaceable. If there is any part of you that believes that this is true because it's matching the vibration to your core wounds, there will be a lot of anxiety produced in the body. Once again, we are working with the body in this scenario, not the mind. So we don't need to dissect your childhood to find out exactly when the traumatic event happened that resulted in your developing these core wounds. It was likely that not one event, but a pattern or series of many events carved this canyon. Memories of the past may surface during your healing journey, and it's important to deal with them appropriately. But digging into the past isn't necessary for this process to be effective. You need to talk to the body and inform it that you are good. You are worthy. You are enough. You are loved. It's not your fault that this happened. You are innocent and deserve to be treated with love and respect. Talking to the cells of your body is powerful. You're talking to your subconscious. You're using a message service, so to speak, to send messages to the cells of your body to change the current belief programming. One of the reasons that lack of trust is there when you carry an internal belief that you are unworthy and unlovable, you will, through the power of your belief, attract people and circumstances that reflect this belief to you. This is the law of attraction. We do this unconsciously because we're not always aware of our deep-seated beliefs. The narcissistic relationships crack us open and expose us to ourselves. It is ironic because the narcissist himself lives in a perfected image of himself and denies the true self, hiding beneath the fantasy image. We all have a certain amount of this going on, but not to the degree a narcissistic personality does. The narcissist has no awareness or only very limited pockets of awareness of the hidden self. His personality disorder was developed to protect him from his core shame and unworthiness by denying the existence of the self that feels this core pain. Most of us have some awareness of the true self we are trying to suppress behind a perfected self-image. But when the narcissist, the master of the false self, comes along, he destroys your illusionary self and exposes you to your own true self. That self that is afraid, that feels all these feelings, that gets angry, that feels worthless, that's insecure and jealous at times, that seeks revenge and wants to see justice served. Yeah. They open the can of worms, for sure. The true self is the real you. It is the you may have rejected in childhood, feeling that who you are is not enough, is not worthy or lovable. So you created a false image of yourself as someone others would like and even love. The problem with this dynamic is that you are failing to love yourself. When you deny yourself, you don't love yourself. When you find fault with yourself and harbor painful and destructive beliefs about yourself, you are not loving yourself. The narcissistic destroyer comes to show you where you have failed to love yourself, where you gave your power away, the false beliefs you've been living under, and the fragility of the false image of yourself. The false image of ourselves is constructed from ego. When our false self crumbles, our ego is exposed. The ego creates the false self or imagined self out of its efforts to survive in the world. So when the false self is exposed and you begin to crumble, the fear for your own survival comes out in the form of panic and anxiety. So many clients have told me, Kaleah, this isn't who I am. I'm not this weak, insecure, fragile person. I'm strong, I'm confident, I'm self-assured. I don't know this weak person. It's not that you are a fragile and weak person, but you have fragilities and weaknesses beneath the surface of your awareness. And it's hidden in what we call the shadow. The shadow contains the aspects of ourselves that are in hiding, that we are unaware of. They are aspects that you deemed unacceptable, unlovable, unwanted, or simply that you didn't know were there. These aspects make up part of your true self, which is all of you, not just the parts you approve of. Healing is a journey of self-love because you need to be willing to extend love to those parts of yourself you have previously rejected and locked away. What about the part of you that is now crying all the time and can't seem to stop? Are you going to bully this aspect and tell it to stop crying? Or will you love this aspect and let it know it's okay to cry, and you will love it through all of its tears? What about the part that feels really angry? I talked about anger in a recent podcast. Can you welcome the part of you that is angry and wants revenge, even if you don't feel it's very spiritual? Can you talk to this part of you and say, hey, it's okay that you're feeling angry. Anyone would feel angry in this situation. You have the right to feel angry. I give you full permission to express your anger in a safe and non-destructive way. I've had clients who tell me that they are so in love with the narcissist in their life that they can't stop thinking about him and can't imagine life without him. And yet she doesn't love herself. Now I've got men that do the same thing, so bear with me for using she. How could she possibly love him? She is addicted to the memory of two false selves living a perfected, idealized life. It may have been quite temporary, but during the time of the meeting of two perfected imaginary selves, there's a fantasy love that is quite powerful. Some will imagine this to be a soulmate or a twin flame relationship, but it's really just a fantasy relationship that is far removed from the true truth. She does not yet know of his narcissism, and he does not yet know that she doesn't exist purely to provide him with a constant source of admiration, positive attention, and adoration. Eventually, the fantasy must crumble. It's not built on anything solid. And the true selves are exposed. But the narcissist denies the actions and behaviors of his true self. He needs to see himself in a perfected light, so he denies anything coming from within that does not match his polished, perfected image of himself. In fact, he will cast the shadow he is denying in himself onto you. You will be accused of the actions and behaviors that are actually coming from him. This is very crazy making. Because your false self is crumbling and your core wounds are exposed, you may easily own the projections the narcissist is casting onto you and believe that you are unworthy of love and acceptance. The narcissist is perfect and you are imperfect. The relationship can only last if you agree to the new terms. You must be willing to play the role of the imperfect, flawed, unworthy counterpart who should feel so lucky to have such perfection in your presence. Most of the people I work with at one point or another reject this role that they've been cast into, and they begin to sift through the pieces of the crumbling false self and find their true self, their authentic self in the ashes. The healing comes in learning to embrace the wounded parts and give them a safe and loving inner environment to come forth and be loved and embraced. As you create safety in your home and inner environment, you are also building trust in yourself. The longer you go without contact with this source of danger as your body sees it, the more your nervous system will calm down and begin to trust the new environment. A young child knows that the rejection from a parent means death because the young child is dependent upon that parent. Still, it is natural that young children blame themselves for any and all parental disapproval. They learn to adapt to the parent's wants and needs as a form of self-preservation. They learn how not to do the behavior a parent disapproves of and do more of what gets them approval. They learn to associate feelings of shame, guilt, and unworthiness with loss of love of the primary caregiver, which ultimately feels like death. So this is a pretty big deal. These feelings become unbearable and thereby unwelcome. It is the ego that makes the connection between if I appear good, I am good. So the ego puts all emphasis on appearances. What do you need to become? What do you need to own or possess? What do you need to look like, dress like, and present to the world? What kind of car do you need to drive? What kind of neighborhood do you need to live in? What kind of friends do you need to hang out with? One's whole life becomes about seeking approval and avoiding disapproval. Anthony Robbins says something similar. He says that as humans, it is our nature to seek pleasure and avoid pain. We see approval as pleasurable and disapproval as painful. So we do whatever we can to be the person who will bring us the most approval. If we have qualities or characteristics that have formerly brought us the disapproval of our parents or teachers or siblings or peers, we've cut off from those qualities and put more energy into the qualities that bring us approval. This is where the false self comes from. The true self is the unaltered self that contains all of who we are, whether or not we like it or whether or not anybody else likes it. It's authentic. Our true self contains all of our feelings, our gifts, our uniqueness, our fears, our pain, and ultimately our connection to our higher self or higher source. When the shell containing our true self cracks open, we are exposed to the aspects of ourselves we have spent a lifetime trying to avoid. Since the ego sees this cracking open as a type of death, it is deeply threatened. This also causes many of the PTSD symptoms, fear, panic, and anxiety. There is a type of ego death that is happening in this situation because the false self or the perfected self-image must die in order to bring the true self forward. And the ego is the false self in so many ways. When we say the narcissist has a big overinflated ego, we mean that the narcissist has a big overinflated grandiose self-image. He believes he is the inflated, grandiose self-image. His true self is locked away behind an impenetrable wall. Ironically, narcissists are masters at breaking down the ego walls of others by focusing on the imperfection of others. Since our ego walls are built to keep our awareness of our real or perceived imperfections locked away, and keep our idealized self-image up front and center, the cracking open of the ego walls is experienced as traumatic. To heal, one must be willing to accept all those parts of himself or herself that has been rejected and locked away, no matter how painful this is. You must be able to confront the lies and align with the truth. The truth is that you're feeling deeply unworthy. The lie is that because you feel unworthy, this means that you are. Connecting with your feelings of unworthiness, shame, self-blame, feelings of inadequacy, and all of your core beliefs and core wounds actually bring you in touch with who you really are. No, you aren't your wounds, but you once believed your wounds made you a bad person. So this lie has to be confronted and dealt with. The truth needs to be revealed. In a sense, you are beginning to embrace all of who you are and integrate the shadow into the light of your self-awareness. You go from hiding behind a false ideal of yourself to being self-aware. This is the gift that comes from any experience that breaks down your ego walls. You have access to who you really are. We often believe that the true authentic self so many are striving to step into is the perfected self, but this is so far from the truth. The true authentic self is the imperfect self. It is the one that says what's on its mind, that feels its feelings and doesn't make them right, wrong, good, or bad, that allows their anger when appropriate, that recognizes appearances have nothing to do with love, and honors the intuitive knowing. As we go deeper into our true authentic self, we also find lost or hidden gifts and unearth a deeper sense of purpose in life. We are able to connect more deeply with others and share who we really are without fear of being rejected or abandoned. We may change our style to reflect one that expresses our authentic self, rather than one that reflects social popularity. We connect honestly with ourselves and our feelings. We might even find a deeper spiritual connection. Where the false self is the self that is altered to fit into society, the true self is unaltered and concerned more with authenticity than fitting in. In order for the true self to fully awaken, the false self must surrender. The false self is like the caterpillar, where the true self is the butterfly that emerges from the death of the caterpillar. The process doesn't happen in humanity without the fear and pain of death. All that fear, panic, pain, and anxiety associated with post-traumatic stress is the ego fighting against the death of the false self. There's a war going on in your body, mind, and emotions as the ego fights for the survival of the false self. There are two things that could happen in this war. Either the ego will win and the false self will be reinstated, or the false self will surrender to the true self. I've seen both scenarios in my work. Those who have deep resistance to feeling their pain and looking at their core wounds will work hard to deny their pain and continue pretending that they are something different than what they truly are. And I call this going back to sleep. And this is possible with some people, but not all. When the true self is victorious, one awakens to a reality where all of who she is valued, loved, and accepted. One becomes aware that she is the one who needs to do the valuing, loving, and accepting of herself. There is an understanding that to look to others for our approval is to give our power away. We give our power to those others to define us, to tell us who we are. You get to decide your own worthiness. The more you find yourself worthy and acceptable, and the more you approve of yourself, the more you send this message out into the world. People will sense your genuine self-confidence that comes from true self-awareness. It doesn't mean that you never feel unworthy, but you come to recognize this as old core beliefs that no longer have power in your life. Core pain isn't eliminated overnight and often not eliminated at all. It is a process that can take years. Because every time your core wounds are triggered, you learn how to self-soothe and offer yourself more love, not less. You learn to truly love yourself in your pain. And the more love you can offer to the one who is suffering, the less suffering there will be. Metamorphosis from the caterpillar to the butterfly is a process, and it does take time. So be willing to be in the womb of transformation. Create a protective cocoon to go through this process. Take good care of yourself. Be in the stillness, the quiet of yourself. Feel. Allow your tears. Breathe deeply. Write about your feelings in your journal. Create safety. There will be a time you are ready to emerge from your cocoon back into life again, but you will not be the same. I guarantee it. You will be meeting the world in your new butterfly body, raw, fragile, like a new baby. It may feel like you are learning to walk again, but really, you are learning to fly. So fly, my friends. Fly above your former reality and look down on it from the higher perspective you now have. You are worthy. You are enough. You are lovable. You are free to be who you are. And so it is. Thank you for listening. If you would like further information about my work, please visit me at narcissismfree.com. or at pathbacktoself.com. If you would like help working through these feelings, this PTSD, please consider scheduling a counseling session with me. You can find out more about my counseling at narcissismfree.com. Meanwhile, have a great day, and we'll see you next week.